I wanted to start with a hard-hitting one. And I just want you to read these out loud.
Okay. Genie at Florida Siren. What the fuck? Period.
It gets better every time.
So if we were on Twitter, I would click into the person's profile and I'd read their bio. Just try to understand like the context of where is this person coming from. Mm-hmm. There's this great Upton Sinclair quote, which is, "It is hard to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it." And so every time I would see something, I would go into the person's bio and be like, software engineer, or like CS student, like CS 25. And I'd be like, okay, I get it. I touched a nerve. I touched a nerve.
Could the same be said for you, though? You are historically a software investor. You've
Sure.
invested in software-related companies. Why do you have a different reaction than, say, a developer to something like this?
That's a good question. I mean, there's definitely an ego part of just wanting to truth tell, regardless of like the longer term ramifications or whether or not it's actually existential. I think for better for worse, the capitalist class is like kind of, it's a broken system. I mean, like we can veer hard right into like, you know, labor value and capital value. From an investment perspective, venture capital benefits from being able to adjust according to underlying tectonic shifts, and it doesn't have to. Few bets in venture capital are necessarily binding. You can always shift. It's maybe like less existential to contemplate the existential threats to software as an investor than it is as a software developer, where the value that you produce to society as defined by GDP is indelibly tied to your role of being a software developer.
Yeah.
That was really heavy.
It had a period at the end of it. This was a complete thought. So I think giving it that kind of weight's important. I think, how long has this thought been bubbling for you? And how did it make its way into that Google Doc?
I've been thinking about this for months, longer than months. I've been articulating it for months in words, mostly in verbal conversation.
Has it changed? Has it evolved as you've kind of iterated and gotten feedback on it?
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like I'm probably stealing this from Steve Jobs. I think a lot of my thoughts are kind of like rocks in a rock tumbler.
Yeah.
And every conversation is a turn of the tumbler, and it gets clearer and clearer. The existential thought had been sitting with me for a while, so much so that I would disclaimer anytime I brought it up in conversation with like, this is probably too doomer. This is very doomer to say, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about this as a dynamic. And I haven't been able to think of an incongruous set of things that would invalidate this hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And it threatens so much of the industry that I work in. Not only does it threaten so much of the industry that I work in, it threatens like an enormous amount of the entire sector that I work in. Like, deeply existentially. Basically, like if you thought that the internet threatened anyone that had content like people who made content on payroll, this threatens any company that has software developers on payroll, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. It's mind-boggling to think about. At the same time, if you were in like 1990 and you said every media company is going to fail, you'd probably be laughed out of the room. It is incendiary to publish the idea that it is going to go away. But I also think, I believe it, and I think there's value in putting that belief out into the ecosystem.
So, I love it. Well, you certainly touched a nerve.
Oh, Logan. I love Logan. Logan Bartlett says, please delete this. Logan is a GOAT tweeter, and this is an incredible tweet. The context there is, as you know, Logan is an incredible SaaS investor, incredible software investor. Cut his teeth at a firm called Battery under an incredible SaaS investor, and then went on very successfully to Redpoint. I don't know if SaaS investors will exist in 10 years. And I love Logan as a human being. I love a lot of people who invest in SaaS. It's almost like it's too easy. Anytime the capital markets converge around and securitize an asset, it creates a cantilever dynamic, like over a cliff. And then when something fundamental snaps, it just all falls down. The reason why I'm not sure if their SaaS investors will exist in 10 years is so much of SaaS investing requires really, really, really high margins for software and high net dollar retention. And those are marks of relatively non-competitive dynamics associated with high switching cost, barriers to entry, sales and marketing being somewhat defensible in creating a moat around your product. And I don't know if any of that will exist once the cost of software goes to zero. Not only is free really, really, really hard to compete against, but when the free options are all competing with each other, that's even harder to compete with.
So in your mind, in that cantilever metaphor, has it cracked? Is it swaying? Has it already crumbled and it's starting to fall, or are we at the free fall moment?
We're not at the free fall moment at all. I'm sure you've heard that gradually, then suddenly.
Yep.
I am terrible at timing. If you asked me to time things, I would be bad. That's why I'm not a public market investor. But I do think about things that will happen eventually. And I think this is going to happen I think it's probably inside of almost...
You said 10 years, no SaaS investors.
I think the capital markets will correct really quickly because investment dollars are very sensitive to shifts. Like if you think about like the Fed announcing interest rate changes, capital markets respond on a dime.
No.
So if something about the underlying ability to durably predict out discounted future cash flows fundamentally changes, capital markets respond immediately. So even if we aren't all the way there,
did we have one of those moments in the last week? Kind of leading up to this post?
Well, so yeah, I mean, the day before I published this, like a number of public software companies got destroyed and like 20, 30, 40% drops in stock price. And I think it's because the cracks are starting to show in the core assumptions underpinning the business model of software. When the margins aren't as high, the growth isn't as strong, the efficacy of sales and marketing isn't quite as good. These are all symptoms of the underlying dynamic, which is competition. Competition is the driver of the invisible hand, and I feel like for a long time the invisible hand hasn't been quite as efficient in software. I mean, it's efficient up to a certain degree.
Which seems counterintuitive given how efficient software should be.
Generally speaking, markets are efficient. And so I would say in the software ecosystem, you have companies like Constellation Software, right? Where like software SaaS companies are treated like securities, or like you can like LBO them.
We had Chamath like packaging up and trying to extract away any kind of idea that like he wanted to index all of them. That these were like the most predictable cash flow you could possibly invest in.
Right. Well, I mean, like when you securitize something, it really depends on the underlying thing being predictable.
Correct.
And then when it's not predictable, everything falls apart.
So do you think that was just another crack? The CRM earnings,
I don't purport to be
or is that our suddenly moment?
I would say that's still part of the gradually.
Okay.
I say that's still part of the gradually. The suddenly is gonna be bad. The suddenly is gonna be bad.
Yeah.
The suddenly is gonna be tens or hundreds of thousands of people that thought their jobs were secure in tech, realizing that that's not the case. It's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. It's like, this is so doomer. I'm like, I sound like the dude from The Big Short.
The blog post that launched 1,000 short sellers. This feels like there's something structural that's going on here.
The hard part is like,
At least that's what you're circling around.
I don't even think you can trade off of this. You can trade off of timeable information. Like, was there money to be made shorting media companies during the rise of the internet?
Probably would have made a lot shorting Time Warner there at the end.
Sure. I have another hot take if you want it.
We're in the business of hot takes.
Unpublished hot take.
I love this.
Speaking of Time Warner, I think OpenAI is the AOL of AI. What do I mean by that? Okay, so anytime there's a new...
This is going off the prompt. There is not just. I want the record to show we barely touched the surface, scratched the surface on tweets over here. But let's go.
Anytime there's a new technology, it's actually kind of a pain in the ass to use as a consumer or as an end user. So the internet, in the early days of the internet, browsers were not uniform. Site safety wasn't obvious or like guaranteed. Even navigating the internet was hard. Pre-search engine, like, how did you get around? What did AOL do? AOL shipped a closed internet. When you have an open ecosystem and it's very DIY, AOL shipped a closed internet. They built a private road and they put a toll booth on it. And they said, look, we're going to give you messaging, email, message boards, news, sports, weather. And I think for a lot of people, like my parents' generation, their understanding of the internet and AOL was one and the same. It's like, oh, like, do you have the internet? Oh yeah, of course I have AOL. So you have this private toll road built. And it's great because you're able to deliver a spoon-fed homogeneous product that is good to users. And you have this public access road. But this you need a 4x4 to drive on this. Here's the issue. Over time, this public access road turns into an 8-lane highway. Yeah. And your ability to extract rent from your private toll road decreases. AOL bought Time Warner because it thought, oh, hey, like we're losing subscribers. We need to shore up our user acquisition. Where can we go? Let's verticalize. Let's go direct. Yep. What they didn't understand is that they were just at a structural disadvantage competing against free and open that had just gotten better. They had this massive leak in their boat, and they thought they needed to like raft it to another boat. No. So what do we have? OpenAI has built a closed system. Yep. I spend time in weird subreddits. One of my favorite subreddits is r/local llama, where it's all basically hobbyists. They have their own rigs. They run open source models on their own computers, doing their own inference. It's awesome. It's amazing. It's probably too much alpha, so maybe we edit that out.
We'll beep it out so no one else knows. It's amazing. What a gatekeeper over here.
OpenAI has built a private toll road, right? It's a great product. It's a great product because it's a new piece of technology. They make it legible to most people, and they charge for it. Again, the problem is the public access road, which is very DIY, it turns into this 8-lane highway eventually. And you look at WWDC, and Apple has a 3 billion parameter model that's just going to run locally on all Apple devices because of the unified memory architecture of their device, which is genius. And so like the vast majority of inference is going to be happening locally on device. There's no cloud inference provider. And all of a sudden, the inference is local on open source models. And then the closed strategy loses its ability to extract rent. So the canary in the coal mine is probably going to be when OpenAI tries to buy distribution. The same way that when AOL tried to buy distribution.
Oh, fascinating.
Now, I'm probably wrong.
Hot takes are, if you're right, 1 out of 10.
But it's a hot take.
I love it.
At Kerman Coley says, tell me you've never written code without telling me you've never written code. Yeah, that's fair. That is super fair. So in my defense, I have have written code.
But you don't identify as a coder or a programmer.
I don't identify as a coder. I've never live streamed myself, yet invested in Twitch. I have never created content to make a living online, yet invested in Patreon. I've never built a mobile game or game at all, for that matter, but I invested in Unity. Mm-hmm. I don't think you have to do the thing to necessarily understand the dynamics that impact one's ability to do the thing. And I think you can examine it without necessarily doing it. If I'm going to throw this back at this person, this is like very gatekeepery, right? It's a very gatekeepery.
Say more. What do you mean?
I don't know. That sounds pretty insecure to me. Right?
Does this go back to your earlier quote about like someone's salary depending on something they probably?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll bet $100 this person's a developer. And like, I get it. The last line in the essay, very incendiary. Very incendiary.
By design.
I think like to drive the point home, to really drive the point home.
What was the last line? Push for the record.
The last line in the essay, majoring in computer science today will be like majoring in journalism in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. That was the last line.
Okay.
What's funny is I feel like people that take issue with that are also kind of telling on themselves or shitting on journalism. There's like two things that are going on there. To take it as an insult, you have to also look down on somebody else's decisions. I would say humans are so bad at understanding the future. The best way that we can understand the future is by putting it in terms of the past. And so I think that's what I was attempting to do. It's funny though. I feel like I saw some people talk about like journalists catching strays. I feel bad about that. I feel bad about that.
We love journalists.
I think journalism
I think
journalism is so important, so critically important for humanity. And I am excited about capitalism surfacing, the free markets and capitalism surfacing the right answer to the incongruity of business model and journalism that exists currently and has existed since the beginning of the internet. I'll be excited for that.
Yeah.
I'll be excited because I think it's like a really important part of society. Okay, all right. Cortland Lear says, everyone fired up over this essay, but I only see one thing. And
what's the image?
The image is Pepe the frog huffing gas and the gas cylinder is labeled copium. It feels good to be white knighted.
Yeah.
It feels good, like you know.
I'm not going to hit you just with the ones that are tearing you down the whole time. We need a well-rounded.
What's like the Kanye West line, right? Like they.
Be careful where we're going.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. They're hating, but at least they're saying something.
That's right.
I think if it didn't resonate at some level, no one would care.
Yeah.
No one would care. Everyone would be like, "Who's this idiot saying this thing that doesn't make sense?" And then they like nobody would respond. Sophie at NetCapGirl, quote, "Software is totally dead, bro. LLMs are going to replace engineers soon, for real, FR." End quote. From VC associate with an econ degree who spent 2 years in consulting. The only lines of code they ever wrote were for an intro to Python course, which they dropped after a couple weeks because they were bored. Very specific, deeply felt.
Just to be clear, you were a partner and founder at this firm, ma'am, not an associate.
I feel attacked. I study economics, so I took that personally. This is fair. This also doesn't say it's wrong.
Yep.
But it's a lampoon, and I accept it. I accept it.
There's another one. This is fun. Are you enjoying this?
This is great.
This is fun.
RockX says, "I was dehydrated when I woke up, but these programmer tears are quenching my thirst." Oh my God, I actually haven't seen this. This is
I told you I went
hilarious.
deep.
This is amazing. This deserves a follow back. This is really good. This is really good. I feel this. So I have a personal Twitter policy of not dunking. I feel like the original tweet was not a dunk. If that policy didn't exist, I would have written that tweet.
That's the one.
It's a great
That's
tweet.
the one.
It's a great tweet. It's a great tweet. It's a great tweet. I mean, it would only be better served by a picture of a mug that had programmer tears written on it.
You're just
Drinking it.
guzzling it.
Just programmer tears.
Okay.
Tom James at TACJ. This stuff says this stuff is like saying, because all the tutorials are available online, nobody will ever need to hire developers anymore. They can just do it themselves. This is this tweet and other kind of slightly similar tweets like there is free software, so it doesn't matter. Actually, kind of fundamentally misunderstand the what's happening.
So what's he missing?
Before the internet, people knew how to write. People knew how to make content. People it was known, but it was still expensive. The cost associated with doing it was still expensive, and the distribution cost was still expensive. Understanding of how to do it isn't actually the fundamental shift. And what this is implying or trying to say is that, well, first of all, I would never claim this, because I think what the internet revealed is that the educational issue was never access to information. It's always been motivation. Right? When Harvard, Stanford, MIT put all their coursework online, I feel like there was this collective sigh of oh, finally, now people can be educated. And then we all woke up to oh, actually.
Didn't want to do homework anyway.
Oh, shit. People just don't want to do it.
Right.
That's why people haven't been educated. People are lazy. People are lazy. Motivation is the constraining issue. People are lazy, and they're not going to teach themselves how to code.
I don't hear that as a judgment on your part. I assume you lump yourself into that same category
super
around
lazy.
things you're lazy about.
Yeah, I'm the laziest person you'll ever meet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like doing things I don't have to do. And I think that people, I would never expect anyone to do something if they didn't want to do it. Here's the thing. When the friction to do something asymptotically approaches zero and then reaches zero, all of a sudden, behavior completely changes. Completely changes. I don't know, I'm pulling analogies out of my ass on the fly. Okay, you're at a buffet. Everything's free. You actually behave differently than if you're ordering a la carte.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental difference in behavior because there's zero marginal cost associated with doing something. Actually, the biggest issue, at a buffet is how big your stomach is, right? How big you're how much you're able to eat, physically able to eat. But barring that, everybody would just eat everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
or there's that tyranny of choice where you just go to the things that you're most comfortable with already, right?
Yes, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. So there's an interesting parallel here where, think about the content you consume today. Think about the average person and their pie chart of information they consume in a day. What percent of the information they consume in a day is pushed to them? It's near 100%.
Near 100%. Oh,
Right.
Absolutely.
Right? Remember when you used to drive to libraries and check out books? And it's you had a thought, I want to read this book. I'm going to go seek this thing out, and I'm going to go get it. It was pull back when people had, encyclopedias at home.
Yep.
You sought out information. The way that you consumed information oftentimes was preceded by a desire to learn something or a desire to seek out information.
Yeah.
That's gone. So now we just you fire up TikTok and you're just scrolling and you're just getting, it just has root access to your attention.
100%.
We are in a moment right now where software has an interesting relationship with humans. Nobody opens up software without some intent, right? You want to message me, and you probably thought to yourself, oh, I want to send Chris, I want to contact Chris. And you're pretty agnostic actually to what thing you use. It could be iMessage or Twitter or email. And you're just like, okay, I'm going to pick whatever tool is best to do this thing. Nobody cold opens software. Nobody's like, hey, I'm going to like fire up this thing without intent.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's like software's like Achilles heel, is if someone or something is strictly better at servicing that intent as a better mousetrap, it's going to cut out everything else. And it will be rewarded by the fire hose of intent. The same way that TikTok, Instagram, YouTube are rewarded by the fire hose of attention.
Yeah.
They're just a better mousetrap for attention, and they put everybody else out of business.
Literally teed up this next one perfectly.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay.
We're moving out of the dunks into a little bit more nuance.
Gonzalo Espinoza Graham at GPT. What's the equivalent for taking a picture of a coffee cup and posting it to 1 million views, but for creating software? It's a really good question. I think that this is the question I think that the essay kind of invites people to ask.
So maybe frame it, if people haven't read the essay, maybe frame up the context for that question and kind of what you were getting at.
Totally. So I think in the essay, I describe how post-internet, content costs nothing to create and it costs nothing to distribute, and it no longer has to make money because it's totally free to create and distribute. Like you could take a picture of your coffee and post it on the internet. No one could see it, or 1 million people could see it, and the market clearing price for the burden of creation is still met, which is crazy. That's what happens when it costs nothing to create and it doesn't have to make money. Right now, software costs money to make, and so it has to make money. What happens when software doesn't cost anything and it doesn't have to make money? So what is the equivalent of taking a picture of a cup of coffee and posting it to 1 million views for software when it costs nothing to create and costs nothing to distribute? And it can be ephemeral or permanent or whatever. It's probably more ephemeral than permanent.
There's no real concept of ephemeral software.
There is no concept of ephemeral software because it is so expensive to create.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you had asked Universal Studios in 1980 whether or not they would ever make a piece of content that existed for a second and then went away forever, they would be like, you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You're crazy. There are real fixed costs associated with like film is expensive. Like all these things are really expensive. So like, why would we ever do that? Our whole business is built on like creating IP and media that can be monetized in a back catalog and like act as this kind of like perpetuity. We don't have a concept of single-use software. We don't have a concept of ephemeral software. But if software is free to create, it's super malleable, we will. Like, you'll think of something, it will start with intent. It will be, I want to do something. It sounds crazy, but software will be created to help you achieve the thing that you want to do, and then it will go away forever.
What's a scenario for single-use software in that sense?
I actually have no idea.
Okay.
Like, if you had asked me what UGC would look like in 1999, I don't know if I would have been able to articulate it at all. I feel like there are some people that are better and more prescient about being able to describe what it looks like, but I'm so limited by my own imagination. It's kind of like what's like the Senate definition of porn. Like I don't know, but I know when I see it.
Yeah.
This is Aaron Levy at Levy. Provocative thoughts for sure, but some fundamental premises that are off. Enterprises don't want a, quote, constellation of things that dynamically serve the same intent and pain points, end quote, instead of Salesforce. Their jobs, supply chains, and quarterly numbers are on the line, unlike the risk/reward of reading an article from Vogue. AI will definitely change quite a bit about software, but mostly that it will make it more important and valuable, not less. So you know what's really funny, actually? Aaron tweeted something and then deleted it and then followed it up with this.
What was the first tweet? Do you remember? Was it more nuanced, less nuanced?
His first tweet was just the laughing, crying emoji.
And how did you interpret that?
He was like, "Oh, this is a joke," and then I think he deleted it and realized, "Oh shit! Actually, I have to come
Run
up
a
with
public company?
I have to come up with like a more articulate response to this." And then he wrote this.
Right.
I'm sure that media executives had really, really eloquent defenses post-internet that probably sound and felt something like this. That's kind of the way I process it. The emperor has no clothes, and I think this is kind of like somebody in the court saying, "Oh no, you have clothes," because they're supposed to say it.
Look at how dependent everybody is on you for this. But the flip side of that is when I read it, the media analogy that came to mind for me was
Here's the thing. When Aaron says enterprises don't want a constellation of things, what does that even mean? Enterprises are a collection of individuals. And like, so a group will behave according to the aggregate of the desires of the individuals. And so if all the individuals are like, I want to do this thing. I want to use this thing because it's better and it's easier. That's what's going to happen. I mean, like, wasn't that Box's original thesis of, hey, like, people can adopt it from the ground up. Like, you don't have to sell. Like the CEO doesn't have to make this decision. Like, some rank and file employee can adopt it, and then it like disperses within the organization.
I mean, that was the promise of Salesforce with their Force platform too, right? Like, we're going to have this marketplace of anything you want, you just plug right in.
Yeah. I don't consider enterprises to be this like spooky, like smoke out of the Vatican decision-making black box. It's like businesses are just a bunch of individuals who are lazy. And so it's like they're going to pick the thing that allows them to be the most lazy.
Is there a metaphor in here that would harken back to the media that looks something like, we have cable TV. Cable TV is the past. The future is a constellation of apps and services that are now trying to get rebundled, and someone, I mean, the viral tweet always is something like, okay, hear me out. We have Netflix, we have all these things, we have all this constellation of media properties. What if we package them all together into one monthly subscription?
You know what I think the actual analogy is for media? Remember when people were saying that people trust journalism?
Yep.
It's like, no. People want to hear from trusted sources. Like, you want to hear from this person and this authority, and that's why people will always turn to like journalistic integrity. Like, you don't want to hear from some rando YouTuber. Like, you're not going to like listen to them. You want to listen to like, I don't mean to like pick on Walter Cronkite or whatever. Like, you want to listen to like the nightly news because it's authoritative. That's what that is.
Interesting.
It's like, actually, no one cares. You're overweighting how much people care about this like trust. People are more lazy than you think.
Okay.
Orcam Yurt 7. End of software? Friends, we just invented the printing press for software. I agree with the sentiment of this. So admittedly, the title of the blog post, End of Software, I would say has multiple meanings. I would say there's one version, which is, this is the end game for software. We are shifting to this final phase of how software will behave. I would also argue that software as we know it will not exist. Like this idea of this companies monolithic creating software and shipping it and us consuming it. That won't exist. We had to come up with the term social media to describe this new kind of thing that people were consuming. There's gonna be some other thing to describe it, but it's not gonna be software.
Do you remember? I didn't. When I read the post, I didn't know how intentional you were for using Salesforce. It was because of the earnings or because of their original marketing campaign. Do you remember their original marketing campaign?
The original marketing campaign was the end of software.
Literally.
1998.
Absolutely. Protests outside of large software vendor user conferences.
Look, there's something funny. It's like you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Feels right. Feels right.
Yeah. I love that. Speaking of living long enough to become the villain.
Josh Ellman. Love Josh. Beautiful post, but you missed one thing. The value will just shift from the individual software makers to the aggregators. This is exactly what has happened in media and exactly what will happen in software when your theory comes true. I actually 100% agree with Josh, and I tried to I feel like I said it in the essay, but maybe it got buried. I think one of the reasons why I was drawing parallels between the two things is I expect things to play out basically the same. It's the same movie. We've seen this movie before, different actors, same ending. There will be aggregators. There will be these platforms. I talked about UGC platforms monopolizing attention. There will be these new platforms that monopolize intent. They will own you at the highest, like as close to your brain routing intent as possible, and you will trust them to do everything, and in exchange, they will monetize your intent. That's what's gonna happen.
Interestingly, Josh participated in a lot of startups over the years. Do you know what he's doing now and what might be informing this tweet?
Yeah, so Josh has always very smartly voted with his feet. I feel like he worked at Twitter, he was at Robinhood, and now he is at Apple working on AI, Apple Intelligence. And they are as well positioned as anyone to be one of, if not maybe the biggest intent router, which is crazy. It's crazy. But it requires them to build a product that is good enough that you can be lazy and trust it. And that's hard.
Yep.
That's really hard.
Oh my gosh, we have so many here that I want to get into.
Greg Hotchmuth at Grex. There will be no revolution in software until we can put first-rate, first-class apps on the computer in my pocket without going through a gatekeeper. Either the gatekeeper goes, or we need a new computer in everyone's pocket. Many people seem in denial about this. I think this underestimates how lazy people are. Let's talk about Apple and antitrust for a sec.
I love how many friends you're winning over. So let's keep pulling on this thread.
I mean, let's talk about Apple and antitrust for a sec, right? The traditional litmus test for antitrust is it is not in the best interest of the consumer. But what if the consumer wants it? What if the consumer is so lazy, they're like, you know what? Just give me the thing. Feels within the best interest of the consumer. So I think.
So he's saying, unless something changes, the Joshes, the Apples, the incumbents of the world are just going to keep getting stronger and stronger because they're going to have a more.
I don't think the gatekeeper goes away. I think the gatekeeper can be replaced by a bigger, badder gatekeeper. But I don't think the gatekeeper goes away because the gatekeeper or Apple is so good at giving consumers what they want, and in exchange, they have this incredible position, as they should. I mean, it's the reason why. They can extract the rent they do on the App Store in the way that Google cannot through the Google Play Store. They've put the work in to deploy the hardware installation base. And Google didn't. Google just shipped Android everywhere. And it's like, okay, you get an operating system, you get an operating system, you get an operating system. Oh, by the way, we're gonna try to put this rent capture thing on top of it. Every person that buys an iPhone is explicitly opting into the ecosystem. That's the difference. And so, I think People are so lazy. People are so lazy.
I can't wait for the supercut of this.
How many times does he say that?
People are so lazy.
But okay, how does that dovetail with the enormous bet you've made on Browser Company?
Sure. The bet that we made on Browser Company is not incongruous with the idea that people are lazy. And I think the bet that we made is that an incredibly talented team like the one at the Browser Company can be better at delivering a product that is superior at earning the trust from consumers and that position of ultimate laziness. Like when the thing does more that you want it to do because it is a great product, you're willing to entrust it more, to do more things. This is Gary Tan, and I love Gary. I love you. I love you.
Oh my God. That was some kind of ring kissing going on there, but yes, proceed.
Gary says, disagree with the ending. When you add a lot of average software to the world, it makes the superlative software more useful because it can do more and have access to better data. What is wrong about this? So I don't think this is going to be adding a lot of average software. I think this actually just, so if there's a bell curve distribution of things, right? Pre-internet, we had a bell curve distribution of media.
You can hear the media exec right now saying, whoa, I don't care if anybody, like some random person on the internet, what do they know?
Exactly.
They will never be able to compete with it. Yeah.
I think the logical fallacy here is that like we have a bell curve distribution of software. Reducing the cost of creation to zero doesn't just increase just average. It actually just like shifts the entire bell curve up. And so there's an even farther distribution, and like the overall denominator increases tremendously. In the same way that we have, there's user-generated content out there that has gotten more views than any produced thing has ever gotten, and that will continue to. We will have other software or things that are created that are way better, way more impactful than anything that exists today. So I think it's not, we're not just flooding the market with average. We are increasing, or literally just shifting the bell curve up, and it's extending out. And so we're naturally going to have even better things on this side, and we're going to have shittier things too. So false premise.
Suck it, Gary! Last one.
Michael Carnganapricorn says, all of the big venture returns will now come from really hard technical problems. Building an easy app will now be considered a hobby or a small business. I understand why he's saying this. Do I think that all big venture returns will now come from really hard technical problems? I don't know about that. So here's the thing. Distribution, still unsolved. Distribution is always this perpetual unsolved problem with every new technological shift because, drum roll, humans are lazy. We suck. Right. We suck at finding the things that we want.
Yep.
You know what's really good?
If we find something that's working, we keep doing the thing that's working.
And we want things that route us to the things that we want. And that is a perpetually unsolved problem. Mm-hmm. So what Josh Ellman was talking about, okay, well, this is going to give rise to an opportunity set of people, of things that deliver what people want more frequently and more effectively, 100%. And actually, those things, those players are going to be the Facebooks, YouTubes, Twitters, what have you, of software in the future. Mm-hmm. I'm sure venture returns will come from solving really hard technical problems, but I don't think that is it. I still think there are probably the biggest venture returns in this next era, in this next phase, are going to be coming from whomever solves distribution of this. Like whoever solves the merchandising, routing, and discovery sorting amidst this Cambrian explosion of software that needs to be sorted through. That's going to be the $1 trillion thing.